North Korea claims to have fired 2 strategic cruise missiles from a submarine on Sunday, in an apparent protest against the joint military drills between Seoul and Washington kicking off this week. In the U.S., the government attempts to ensure public confidence in the country's banking system by guaranteeing all SVB customers will have access to all of their money starting Monday. Team Korea still has a chance of qualifying for the quarterfinals after beating the Czech Republic in their 3rd game of the World Baseball Classic. Under tight circumstances, the Korean squad faces China tonight. Our top story this morning, North Korea claims to have fired 2 cruise missiles from a submarine on the eve of the biggest military drills between Seoul and Washington in years. Those drills kick off today. Our defense correspondent Kim Yeon-sung is on the line to give us the details. Yeon-sung, fill us in.
Well, Tommy, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff sent an alert to reporters this morning saying that they detected unidentified missiles fired from a North Korean submarine in the peninsula's East Sea. According to the North State-run Korea Central News Agency, North Korea on Sunday dawn fired 2 strategic cruise missiles in the East Sea from a submarine named 824 Hero Sub, whilst conducting an underwater drill. The news agency said the drill was supposed to test weapon reliability and the submarine unit's attack form above and underwater. It reported that its mission was a success. The North said the 2 missiles traveled in 1,500-kilometer figure-of-8-shaped flight orbits, taking a little more than 7,560 seconds to directly hit their target. South Korea Joint Chiefs of Staff are investigating to verify the claims. If confirmed, an expert says this would be the first instance of a North Korean submarine launching a cruise missile. It would also mean that the missile could potentially reach as far as a U.S. Army base in Japan's Okinawa. North Korean news also said the launch showed the North Korean military's unwavering commitment to suppress South Korea and the U.S.'s obvious military actions with overwhelming power, and that this missile launch demonstrated North Korea's readiness to prevent nuclear war in any setting.
So the Sunday's provocation is a clear protest against the joint South Korea-U.S. drills dubbed the Freedom Shield. Let's talk about the exercises.
Well, it is the Allies' largest combined military exercise in 5 years. Since 2018, large-scale live field training has been scaled back or called off to keep alive the hopes of diplomatic relations with North Korea and to fend off COVID-19 infections. But now it's back for 11 days, which marks the longest combined training course for the Allies ever. The drills are supposed to enhance combat readiness and defense posture by conducting extensive field training exercises on the Korean Peninsula under the name Warrior Shield FTX. And North Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Monday issued a statement that mentions this joint drill. And it says that it responds strongly to the U.S. and its followers' quote, hostile scheming. An expert has noted that North Korea's recent missile launch appears to be a clear warning message from North Korea as it puts the entire Korean peninsula within range.
All right, Yeon-sung, thank you for that report. Now, moving on, President Yoon Suk-yeol has been asked to chair a plenary session at U.S. President Joe Biden's second summit for democracy. In a letter to Yoon, Biden formally asked the South Korean leader to join the virtual summit's opening on March 29th and lead one of the 5 plenary sessions. The online session will focus on democracy power and potential around the world. The U.S. president launched the Summit for Democracy in 2021, gathering over 100 world leaders to highlight political rights and civil liberties amid concerns of growing authoritarianism around the world. The U.S. will co-host the second summit with South Korea, Costa Rica, the Netherlands, and Zambia. With the Chinese President Xi Jinping securing his unprecedented 3rd term as a leader, China's National People's Congress draws to an end this morning. Xi will close the event with a speech on the future direction of the state. Our Lee Si-hoo reports.
The annual session of China's rubber stamp parliament, the National People's Congress that kicked off on March 5th, is coming to a close on Monday. The closing ceremony will be held at Beijing's Great Hall of the People at 9 a.m. local time. One major achievement from the session was the endorsement of Xi Jinping's unprecedented third term as China's president. On Friday, Congress unanimously voted to endorse Xi's third term, making him the longest-serving head of the state since its founding in 1949. It's expected that President Xi will deliver a speech at the closing ceremony where he'll share the future direction of the state. There was also a leadership reshuffle for the central government. Li Shang, one of Xi's most trusted protégés, was chosen as China's new premier on Saturday. On Monday morning, Li is set to hold a press conference to discuss future plans regarding the economy. Other senior appointments include 4 new vice premiers who will work to revive China's economy after 3 years of strict zero-COVID restrictions. The NPC also approved a plan to reform institutions under State Council, including the formation of a financial regulatory body and National Data Bureau, as well as a revamp of its Science and Technology Ministry. The changes are seen as a further step by Xi to strengthen control over key areas of policy making. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
This just in as we come on air. Following the dramatic failure of Silicon Valley Bank, the 16th largest bank in the U.S., the government has announced that all depositors at the collapsed bank will have access to their money the first thing on Monday morning. Our Lee Kyung-eun has the latest.
All eyes are on what's next following the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Watchers were on high alert for information over the weekend ahead of the market opening on Monday. And on Sunday, the U.S. government announced that all deposits at the tech-heavy lender SVB will be available on Monday. Plus, in a separate measure to strengthen public confidence in the banking system, the Federal Reserve announced it would create a new lending facility for the nation's banks to buttress them against financial risk caused by the SVB crisis. The announcement is some much-needed relief for SVB customers and beyond. Initially, after California regulators shut down SVB on Friday, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation stepped in. It announced that insured customers with deposits of up to $250,000 will be able to access their money when all offices and branches of SVB reopen on Monday. But deposits over that amount accounted for 85% of SVB accounts. The announcement came after federal officials spent the weekend scrambling to come up with a measure other than a bailout. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Sunday said a bailout of SVB is not on the table, citing improved resiliency in the U.S. banking system. Yellen's remarks are in line with the White House immediately expressing confidence in the response on Friday when California regulators shut down SVB.
Our banking system is fundamentally different because of the changes that we put in place in 2008. For example, they have to hold more capital. They undergo stress tests. So we know that we had to build more resilience into our banking system, which allows it to withstand these kinds of shocks.
Despite the extended protection of depositors, there are still concerns as the majority of deposits at SVB were not insured, meaning a struggle to meet payroll for firms if their money cannot be recovered. Now the FDIC is seeking a buyer for the stricken bank. If no buyer can be found, the FDIC will sell off SVB's assets in order to repay uninsured depositors. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
The new school year is in full swing here in South Korea. A week into the new semester, students are already busy coping with increasing rent and food prices. Our Lee Soo-jin has this report.
From rent to meals, students in South Korea are grappling with high costs. The average rent for a studio apartment near a university in Seoul jumped from $340 a month in 2021 to almost $390 last year at the current exchange rate. The rise in rent is largely driven by increased demand from the complete resumption of in-person classes.
And it was hard to find decent prices with different houses. But now, I think for me, I was really lucky that I could find a house near school.
The surge in rent prices has also been exacerbated by the preference of rents over jeonse.
It only actually exists in Korean housing market. So for jeonse renters, they need to deposit big chunk of money to the homeowners. But as interest rate is skyrocketed from last year, it became more profitable for renters to deposit that big money in the banks instead to deposit that money to house owners. So they prefer to go through monthly rent.
Rent prices of off-campus housing at Ewha Women's University soared 38% between 2019 and 2022. At Yonsei University, it rose 20%, and at Korea University, 16%. Food prices have also gone up. More and more students are trying to save money by eating at university cafeterias like the one behind me. The demand is so high that students have to wait as long as 30 minutes during peak lunch hours.
There are many instances where meals cost more than 10,000 won due to rising cost. But I have campus food, I can eat more healthy. So I come to eat our school's cafeteria more often nowadays.
This self-service cafeteria, where students can choose what to eat and how much, costs around 6,500 won, or $5, and some other places on campus are cheaper still. Students are also opting to order coffee at the school cafe, where a latte costs only around $2, around half the price of a latte from some franchise coffee shops. With more students watching their budgets in this high inflation environment, coffee shops like this one are likely to be busy all semester. 이수진, Arirang News.
It's no exaggeration to say it's hard to enjoy a trip to a restaurant in South Korea right now as the cost of dining out soars. And the high inflation is clearly hitting the pockets of busy workers who are seeing increases reflected at their lunch and dinner tables. For more on this, we turn to Professor Kim Se-wan from Ewha Women's University. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
So for many workers here in South Korea, including myself, it's not always easy to cook at home and eat at home, so instead they eat out. But dining out hasn't been the most affordable option recently. Why is that, and how long will this unwelcome rise last?
I pretty much agree with you. I personally saw that price of jjajangmyeon increased up to 7,000 won level from previous 6,000 won in a month. The overall price level measured by Consumer Price Index is continuously declining from July last year, where inflation per year exceeded 6%. But last month's inflation per year came down to 4.8%. However, to most people, declining price is not realistic because higher restaurant prices became another big burden of inflation. According to Bank of Korea, restaurant prices increased by over 10% in February compared to the same month last year. Since the skyrocketed agricultural product prices last year in wheat, corn, cooking oil, and so on are reflected this year's restaurant prices, we can expect that the eating out price will be stabilized around the end of this year.
Okay, it's the so-called domino effect affecting each other. Right. And also you mentioned consumer prices rose 4.8% last month from a year earlier. Do you expect consumer prices to continue to go up this month? And well, you said until the end of the year, but what's your forecast for now?
Well, that is a tough question because there are still lots of uncertainties ahead of domestic inflation, like the war in Ukraine, abnormal temperature, oil production cut by oil-producing countries, and so on. But I would say inflation momentum gets weaker as time goes by under the assumption that electric power and gas prices are not raised much by government. For forecasting future general price changes, we take a look at the core inflation, which excludes food and oil items. The core inflation is stabilizing quickly, less than 5% per year, thanks to weaker demands in declining economy. So we can expect that overall price level will be stabilized by the end of this year. But again, I have to say that there are lots of uncertainties ahead of future inflation in geopolitical factors and agricultural production factors.
Right, rather gloomy outlook for the rest of the year. But what are some of the factors that we have to pay attention that will actually calm the high inflation? Some of the factors that we have to pay extra attention to?
It is highly expected that domestic inflation would be declining continuously until the end of this year if all other factors are equal. As we talked about, the most recent inflation in February is 4.8%, but it is still more than doubles Bank of Korea's inflation target of 2%. This high inflation will approach 2% level by the end of this year, hopefully. The largest reason for declining inflation is, of course, economic downturn for this year. Last year's economic growth was about 2.5%, but this year's economic growth would be cut down to 1.5% level. It means that households and corporations need less goods and services, and it lessens the higher price pressure. Also, international oil price and agricultural price will be more stabilized this year, and that will be additional factor that stabilize domestic inflation.
Right. All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for your time this morning, as always.
Thank you for having me today.
A large fire broke out at Hankook Tower's Daejeon plant late Sunday night, with firefighters still fighting the blaze. Breaking out just after 10 p.m. on Sunday, the fire has reportedly burnt around 40,000 tires. In the early hours of Monday morning, the response was upgraded to level 3, with all available personnel and equipment mobilized. Authorities say high winds, combined with highly flammable materials at the plant, have made it difficult to extinguish the fire. So far, 10 factory workers and 1 firefighter have been taken to the hospital due to smoke inhalation, but are not seriously injured. Residents living nearby have also been evacuated due to the heavy smoke. Team Korea still has a chance of qualifying for the quarterfinals after beating the Czech Republic in their 3rd game at the World Baseball Classic, but under tight circumstances. Our Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
Behind a masterful performance by South Korean starting pitcher Park Se-eung and 2 long balls from San Diego Padres infielder Kim Ha-sung, South Korea got their first World Baseball Classic 2023 win by defeating the Czech Republic 7-3 on Sunday. On the same day, Japan defeated Australia 7-1 to remain undefeated in Pool B, with the Aussies now sitting in 2nd place with 2 wins and a loss. Although it won't be easy, South Korea can still technically qualify for the quarterfinals. That is, if the Czech Republic defeats Australia by a huge run difference on Monday, and South Korea defeats China by a large margin later that evening. Australia currently has a run difference of +5 after defeating China and South Korea, but losing to Japan. However, with 2 losses and a win, South Korea has a run difference of -6. This means in order for South Korea to qualify, they would need to beat China by 6 runs, while the Czechs must defeat the Aussies by 6 runs. That's why the 3 runs given up during Sunday's 7-3 win were crucial, as South Korea could have had an easier path going into Monday's game with a run difference of just -3. On paper, Australia is the stronger team compared to the Czech Republic. But in sports, anything can happen, with South Korea now having to rely on both skill and some luck if they want to move on to the next round with Japan. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley joining us here in the studio. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Dami.
Let's start with Saudi Arabia's Aramco, as the state-owned oil giant has announced record profits for the year 2022.
Well, that's right, $161 billion. That's the amount of record profits that Saudi Arabia's Aramco made last year. Now, the earnings mark a 46.5% increase compared to 2021. The profit surge comes on the back of soaring energy prices since the start of the war in Ukraine, and an increase in sales volume for the company. It is also the highest ever annual profit by a publicly listed company. But the announcement has drawn criticism from climate activists, concerned over accelerating climate change caused by fossil fuel use. Now, Aramco's earnings follow a trend in large profits pocketed by the energy industry last year, as America's ExxonMobil reported $55.7 billion of profit and Britain's Shell reported $39.9 billion of profit. Now turning over to the UK, where the BBC sports programmes this weekend were disrupted amid a row over free speech. Much of the BBC's football coverage on television and radio was taken off air or shortened after a number of sports show hosts, commentators and even players joined a boycott against the British broadcaster. It comes after longtime freelance host of the popular Match of the Day programme, Gary Lineker, was relieved from his presenting role on Friday. This follows a tweet he made earlier in the week criticising the British government's asylum seeker policy. The BBC has defended its decision to remove Lineker, saying his tweet fell outside its due impartiality guidelines. Now, at least 8 people are dead and another 7 are missing after 2 boats suspected of smuggling people capsized off the coast of San Diego. Rescue services were notified of the incident near Black's Beach on Saturday evening by a survivor who called 911. She was among a group of 8 people who managed to get their boat ashore. She also said there were 15 people aboard the second vessel. All of those killed were adults, but their nationalities remain unknown. San Diego lifeguard chief James Gartland called the incident one of San Diego's worst maritime smuggling tragedies. It comes as human trafficking in the region has surged since 2017, with at least 23 killed at sea in 2021. And finally, after 5 months on board the International Space Station, Crew 5 have returned to Earth. Traveling in the Endurance capsule, the team of 4 made a safe splashdown off Florida's Gulf Coast on Saturday, local time. That team included the first Native American woman to be sent into space, as well as the first Russian cosmonaut in 20 years to travel on an American spacecraft. The crew spent their time on the ISS conducting critical science experiments and technology demonstrations. They had been in space since blasting off on a SpaceX rocket from Cape Canaveral on October 6th last year.
Good morning. Cold wave alerts have been issued across Korea. Morning temperatures are 8 to 13 degrees Celsius lower than the same time yesterday, while the weather agency issues a cold wave advisory when the morning temperatures drop more than 10 degrees from the previous morning. And along with biting winds, feels like temperatures are a lot colder, so do bundle up on your way out. Now please forget about last week's March record warms. We are back to late winter-like conditions, and afternoon temperatures in the capital will also top out at only 7 degrees. And high winds in coastal regions will climb to in excess of 20 meters per second, with a strong wind advisory issued in those areas, so please take precautions against strong winds. But on the other hand, thanks to the cold wind, most of the dust in the air has been pushed away from the country, except in Daegu and Ulsan this morning. And those in the south will feel even colder, with highs to drop about 7 degrees lower than yesterday this afternoon. Now the cold snap eases tomorrow afternoon, while skies remain sunny throughout the week this week. And that's Korea for you. Here's a look at the international weather conditions.
that wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Do stay with us for more updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day.